Get in on the action and make your bet with Sports Interaction. With competitive odds, the best live in play, and more ways to get into the game. Make your next bet with Sports Interaction. Head to sportsinteraction.com/SDPN or download the app to get started. 19 plus. Please play responsibly. We should talk about Elias Lindholm. And he made it pretty clear to us, and he feels he's made it pretty clear to the organization that he would like to stay as a member of the Calgary Flames. We did try to ask him if the front office changes or performance will have anything to do with that decision. He said, no, it's pretty clear. I've made it pretty clear why I want to stay in Calgary, which to me, this has got to be about money, right? The Bo Horvat contract comparable, the Dylan Larkin comparable, Mika Zibanejad. We've done that throughout the summer. This is a man who wants a little bit more than that 8.7, probably more than that 9 million. How do you see this?
Well, what was your impression? Because you were standing there what was your read on Lindholm yesterday when you were at the golf tournament? What he said, what his body language was like what did you come away? What was your main takeaway from that experience and being able to talk to him?
I loved how short and punchy he was, and just he knows what he wants. This is a guy who knows what he wants. To me, this is about, and I know I mentioned it earlier, to me, he wants his money. He wants to get paid. The Flames are the only team that could pay him that max contract and give him all that money, even though he's a guy about to enter his age 29 season. I think sometimes with some Lindholm interviews, it could be a little bit awkward because he could be a little dry, but I felt his approach on Wednesday was purposeful. It was short. He there were some questions he was just giving a one-word answer to. There was at least one notable one where he was asked, "Hey, do you want to stay in Calgary?" And he's just like, "Yes." He didn't give any long preamble, just yes. And he kept saying, I made it pretty clear I want to stay here. At this point, I got the sense that maybe it doesn't give the most perfect window into how negotiations are going, but to me, this is a guy who he's made his demands known, and he is firmly putting his foot in, and it's on the Flames to do something about it. And I have my thoughts on that too.
Right. Well, so here's what I saw in the clips from a distance, sitting in my living room yesterday watching this. I saw frustration there, and and it's for all the reasons you're saying, because I do believe he wants to stay in Calgary. He's made that known for months now. There was a period of time, I think end of June, maybe even into early July, but certainly end of June, where there was some back and forth between the Flames and his camp. Things were heating up. It looked like it was progressing towards something that could be a deal. And my understanding, Julian, is there's been almost no talk over the summer. Maybe even no talk, but certainly no negotiations have happened really since then. And so, you can understand why that might be difficult for him. I mean, what do you say at that point? I mean, you say you want to stay. You guys are exchanging some numbers, and then all of a sudden it goes quiet for a long period of time. And I don't know that we can sit on the sidelines and read too much into that. I still think that there's tons of time. The way I would tell you, if we talked about a number of players around the league that are entering the final years of their deals, there's still tons of time to get something done. And I don't think that the fact that it's been quiet will get in the way of getting something done. But at some point, something has to happen. And it just feels like there hasn't been a push to sign him, frankly, from the Flames end of things. And look, they're dealing with a lot of different players, which it seems like that's going to be a huge story you're telling again and again and again through various lenses of, different players. There's different calculations, of course, from the organization when working through those decisions, different priorities perhaps for each of the players. But Lindholm to me has always seemed like the key decision. I mean, if you were going to trade him, I think that time would have already happened. Quite honestly, I don't see that as being as relevant now. It's not to say he couldn't be traded, but most teams have kind of set their, where they're going. And I just don't see that making much sense. And so you'd think at some point here, the Flames are going to have to make a push to sign him, or I guess decide not to. But everything just seems to kind of lingering there. And I think if you're probably Lindholm's shoes entering that interview, you want to get something done, but it feels like the other side maybe for whatever reason hasn't made it as big of a push to do so. What do you say? And so I think that's probably why it was, I don't know if it was a weird interview. You're right. I've talked to Elias a few times over the years, and he's from the more northern part of Sweden, where they're known not to be as verbose as you and I are probably. they have a saying up there that translates to like the strong silence. Like the idea in northern Sweden, sometimes it's actually a positive to be able to sit and not have to fill all the space with words, to have some silence there. But I think it's a weird, kind of a strange situation for him. And, I don't know. Are they going to make that push before training camp starts? I mean, they've only got a few days here. And if not, it's certainly going to be a storyline, I think, that follows the team throughout the season, not just with him, but Backlund, Tanev, Hanifin, and everybody else.
Man, the more I think about this, and you can tell me if I'm wrong, Craig Conroy, because of the waiting, because of the fact that it's taken this time, the fact that, as you're saying, that there was this dead period after the end of June when the organization straight up said that Elias Lindholm would be a priority, for one, is shocking to hear. But I think the fact that they've let this sit for as long as they've done, Craig Conroy has essentially put himself in an almost a no-win position here, because I think now if he signs Elias Lindholm to that contract, you're doubling down on this core and you're hoping that, okay, they're built to be talented and compete for Stanley Cups, but are they better than Vegas? Are they better than Edmonton? They could find themselves in that mushy middle. That's a whole thing in itself. But if you move on from Elias Lindholm now, when players are getting back into the swing of things, a lot of them were telling us about the fact that the roster is more or less the same and they don't have to worry about any shock value. They don't have to worry about any culture shock for anybody. Remember what last season was like when all of that movement was going on with the Gaudreaus and the Kachucks, and then you're bringing in Huberdeau and Weegar and you're trying to integrate guys? At least that move happened in July and you're trying to get some time in, but it was still weird for all of those guys. Could you imagine if the Flames were in a position now where they were like, oh, we have to move on from Elias Lindholm, and they try to find some suitor, which, by the way, there are only a small handful of teams who can afford his contract at $4.85 for this year, and there's no guarantee that he might want to extend with those teams. So who knows what you're getting in return? There's so many different scenarios.
We got to tap the brakes a bit, though. There's still time.
There's time, yes.
Remember, there's an art to a negotiation, and there's a lot of stuff that goes on in negotiations, and there's still time, because I do believe at the end of the day,
there is.
If we clear everything away, I do believe he wants to be there. I think that they can probably give him the best contract, even more than he can hope to earn as a free agent or potential unrestricted free agent on July 1st. And it might be a one phone call away. You know what I mean? I'm guessing that the Flames have a pretty good idea of a number that would get it done. And it might not be a long conversation, really. I mean, obviously there might be some back and forth on structure and the no move clauses and things like that. But it might not be a hard path here to get a deal done if the Flames decide to do so. It's just, I don't know. I don't know why it's been slow. I mean, look, there's been a change in the front office too. Let's call that as it is. I know that Conroy's been there, obviously, and is familiar with how things operated under Brad Treliving before him. But he's got to make his own decisions, and there's probably a contract of this size. You're talking to upper management and ownership and all that sort of stuff. So, I mean, I'm not saying that this should be an easy process necessarily. And again, Lindholm is far from the only player, and Calgary's far from the only team that has pretty notable frontline talent that are entering a potential walk year. But how it gets handled, I mean, it's going to define in some ways this era, the early days of Conroy's time running the front office. I think there's no way around it. And there's not necessarily, as much as I love Elias Lindholm as a player, there is a debate to be had about what you pay him. And because of his age and how long that contract goes, I'm acknowledging it's a difficult thing to maneuver here. But I do wonder, how big of a story will this be in training camp if it still remains kind of undecided? And will Elias Lindholm keep taking those questions from people like you and your colleagues out there in Calgary? Is he going to want to keep discussing this if it just hangs there? I mean, it's the business side of hockey factors into the way things play out. And I think this just feels like business that's just been hanging there. And for whatever reason, it hasn't been pushed forward yet.